build a lot of muscular strength, because in Tai Chi, the concept is not to use excessive physical strength, but to use the mind to direct the movement. So, that in itself is very unique in the type of exercise it is. And, all exercises are not created equal, in a sense that, a lot of exercise, or people that are younger think that, um, they're building their body, building strength and working your musculature. And it is true that if you exercise, and depending on what you do as an exercise, you will develop, um, strength in your muscles. If you're an athlete, you would develop strength in a certain way, specifically for the sport or the task at hand. But when you're injured, you might go to physical therapists, and they're gonna like try to help you improve or strengthen a certain muscle group in your body. But in Tai Chi, we try to do everything. It's sort of more of a systemic training for the whole body. And what we're trying to do is stimulate circulation, improve coordination, improve balance, work with your proprioceptive system, and work with uh, all your capacities in learning. From the visual learning to the audio understanding to how do you build certain postures, and how do you memorize all of this. So, when you work your memory, you improve your memory. When you work your body to build coordination, you get more coordinated. You work on balance, then your balance will improve. But the technique of doing that generally is not understood, and a lot of times people don't realize that it's a process. And that process is to take you from a person that's somewhat uncoordinated to a much more coordinated being. If you're lacking some balance, it could be not just strength, it's just um, the way you perceive things to be. That you should lean forward or stay erect, balance your body. Those are sort of feelings that you develop from doing something like what we do in the forms. We work with our postures because we start to become more aware of our positions, and what are we doing? We're mobilizing our joints, and that happens from what the brain tells the body to do. So I talk a lot about that because a lot of people don't realize that you know movement is learned. You have to go through a process. It's a motor skill, and you have to understand what you're trying to do. So when we're doing these exercises, such as the ones we're going to be doing now, we're in a shoulder width stance, and we're turning 1, 2, 3. We're just moving from side to side, but we're releasing the tension in the body. So that's really the most important thing. So release the tension in the body, meaning um, releasing the tension in the joints, take out some of the rigidity that you may have in the body, and then you work from there. Much of it is just to develop an understanding that we're not moving on a physical basis, although it's physical, but it's really gentle, and it's actually learning to manipulate your skeleton. When we bend to the side, the same thing applies. So everything that we do applies to this concept. Strength is good. It helps with certain functions, but excessive strength becomes really a waste of energy, and it's also not necessary. So this is sort of the premise of Tai Chi, that we use very little strength, or the least amount of strength, to achieve the task. Not that we don't use any strength at all, because just for your body to stay connected in the joints, there has to be a bit of tonus and tension in those areas. Otherwise, your body would fall apart and disconnect. Uh, okay, Sana. Now we're going to lift up like this, and we do a bit of stretching. So stretching is just increasing the range of motion and releasing and letting the muscles work in a balanced way. So you have to turn to one side, and you turn to the other side, and you're back to center, and you lift up. You inhale and exhale. So there is some breath there is some movement with breath, and movement is really one of the important aspects of Tai Chi. It's also one of the important aspects of many of the type of Qigong exercise that a lot of people like to do. It's breath and movement. Now, some people think that you can just stand and meditate and you're going to get the same benefit, but most Qigong exercises involve movement. And there's a reason for that. You have to involve movement because movement is actually what stimulates circulation. And if you want to stimulate circulation so that your whole body gets the benefit of that circulation, then you have to move your whole body. You just can't move one side of it. Okay, just fixing this. Okay, circular movements. Reverse. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this is just making a circle, but actually it does take some coordination. Some people that I've taught in in some of the centers have a little bit of trouble making just a simple circle like this. So we can't just assume that anyone can do this. It takes some effort and takes some work. If you've never made a circle like this, you probably will have a little trouble. Okay? Cross your arms, bend your knees, and you make circles here. So movements are generated. You have to generate the movement, and movements are created. So all the things that we do were created, and they actually were developed centuries ago by people that realized that the body's capable of doing that, or doing this at this point. Reverse the hands, so we're on the outside, circular movements. Okay, center, hands on your waist. We do the neck now, turning 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2. Back and forth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2. Sana, tilt to the side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 1, and stop. Circular movements, bend from the neck down. Actually, your whole body is actually creating the circle on a mental level, but on the physical level, you do see the head making a circular motion. And center. Hands up. This is my deep breathing exercise. And you lift the hands like this, and you fold your elbows. Elbows go out to the side, keeping the arms horizontal and shoulder level. And you go up on your toes. That's your inhalation. This is your exhalation. You lift up, inhale, exhale. So one other thing we do when we breathe in the forms, or actually when we do these exercises, most of the time we're breathing through the nostrils, we're breathing through the nose. And we inhale and exhale through the nose. We keep the tongue touching the roof of your mouth, and we do a long breath when we're doing the deep breathing. In the form itself, the form is not specifically inhalation, exhalation for every movement. It's more of a natural breathing. Generally, sinking down when you drop, you would exhale, and it doesn't have to be every time you sink, you have to exhale. It depends on sort of the intensity of the movement and the purpose of the motion. So that's a whole nother level of thinking. But the thing is, you usually use your exhalation on the forceful side of movement. But because Tai Chi is not forceful, not in this specific form, you're actually not generating the kind of force or power that someone that's doing it as a martial art would be doing. So the exhalation, inhalation can be, just a natural breath, not totally concerned that every movement going out and coming back is related to that exhalation, inhalation. Because the reality is the movement is consciously using an intent. So your intention is gentle, then your breath can be gentle and the length of the movement can be sort of coordinated with the movement, but constantly breathing while we're moving. Okay, so you shouldn't be holding your breath. In this instance, we inhale and then we exhale. Then you keep the balance between the inhalation and exhalation about the same length. You don't want to inhale long and exhale short because that would throw your breathing off. Okay, now we're going to do a little bit of stretching in the wrists. Just to get the muscles sort of acclimated to movement. So this really works your forearms on both sides. We create a motion like this that may not be easy in the beginning because it does take a little bit of control where the two hands are linked together. And then you can reverse, but you have to play around with this to figure out exactly what has to move. I can give you the hint that your wrist moves, your forearms move, and your shoulder moves, and eventually you can feel it, throughout your torso. But the thing is, that's going to take some time. Okay. Now, when we're here, we can press out to stretch the fingers. We can lift it over the head. This loosens up the shoulders. This takes you down to here. And then we can just relax. So this is your vertical position. We go out to the horizontal position. We invert the hand and then flip the hands over like this and try to get your fingers to work. So you're getting these joints kind of moving a little bit. But, don't overdo it. You just trying to generate a movement. If you can't do this, then you can actually just move your hands like you're washing your hands. Just move your hands like this. And that actually will stimulate some circulation as well. So we can do many things, just rubbing your arms will actually like this will stimulate circulation. Okay, now we're going to go like this. Spread the feet. And then we're going to turn a bit. We're going to loosen up the spine. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Okay, so that kind of helps you free up. We don't hold positions. We just move through them, and then we go in the opposite direction. Now, that takes a bit of control and balance and movement. Now, this is probably the most physical side of these exercises, because stretching is something that has to be built over time. So when we speak of strength and flexibility, and I speak of strength, I talked about strength earlier, that when we're, sort of trying to strengthen a certain area, you would maybe use some weights or some machines or whatever. With this, we just use our physical weight. It's a weight-bearing exercise. It does take more strength to hold a more proportional weight on a single leg. In other words, if you spread your weight 50-50, it's just constantly just holding half of your weight. As you transition and you move more weight into, say, the front leg, obviously there's more weight on this leg. So you will build that type of strength, and you have to actually work it slowly. Okay. But stretching kind of helps to increase range of motion and to balance the difference between rigidity and flexibility. That balance you have to really discover on your own as to how far and how stretched you can go. But the more you do it, the further you can go. So that's really a function of time. Do not overstretch. Do not force the movement. Just try to relax and just let go and try to reach further each time you go into the position. It doesn't have to be a bouncing movement. In fact, bouncing and stretching, if you're not really accustomed to it, will cause an injury. You can tear a muscle, you can injure yourself, especially. So that's why when I stretch, I'm stretching one side at a time. Okay, and when I go to the center, I can actually go down and try to touch my toes. But if you can't support yourself on the knees, this is challenging for some people because you're going down like this. So don't do this one if you don't have the flexibility. There are a couple of stances in the form that are pretty challenging because of the flexibility required. But don't look at those as the end goal, because those postures that you see people going down didn't do it day one. They did it maybe day 300 or whatever. The younger you start to do that, the more likelihood you'll be able to get down there. So if you're starting this as a senior, that downward posture isn't the most critical movement. And the kicks are not the most critical movement. So don't look at those as things that you can't do initially. You can try to build toward it, but it's really not, it's really not the most important part of it, because it's too physical in one sense, but yet circulation can be achieved just with the movements without that. So in the Tai Chi paradigm that I teach in the Wu style and at the school, actually doesn't have those downward posture movements. I feel those are going to be too difficult to do, and you can build toward it at some point, but if you never get to a downward posture, that's fine, because that's really not the end goal. All right. Now, deep breathing again. So before I do a few of the postures, we're going to turn the hips like this, because range of motion and manipulation of the skeletal structure, which is really moving the joints, is what's important. So I'm turning out. I turn the foot like this. I turn the foot like this. If you can coordinate your limbs so that you can sink in the stance, you will open up the hip. It's important to open like this because of the pivoting that we do when we turn. Okay, now we're going to loosen up the leg like this, and then make another circle like this. So that's happening in the hip. This one you might have a little trouble with trying to get the leg to make a circle. It does, like anything else, require practice. So if you have a little trouble making that circle, just keep trying to do it. You don't have to do hundreds of these. Do about a dozen of these in one direction, a dozen of these in the other direction, and that's all you need to do as part of your routine. Then you build your sequence. So this movement is preparation. We're in a shoulder width stance. This movement is your starting position. This movement is opening. And then we do the preparation. Then we can turn the foot out to hold the ball. That's one side. We can flip to the other side and hold the ball on this side. We step out into this empty stance, and then we go forward. And then we sit back. We switch feet from the hold the ball position. You go forward to part the horse's mane. So you have a right and left side part the horse's mane. It depends on which side is forward. When your right leg is forward, if you're doing a mirror image, then you would have your right hand up. And this hand is down by the hip, palm down flat. This hand is in a horizontal circle position, and it's rounded, and your palm is facing you. So you have one of these on each side. Okay? So that gives you a sample of part the horse's mane. All right? When we bring our hands together and we bring one of the feet forward, you have stork flaps wings. So typically this is the normal side. The opposite side would be this. This would be the mirror image. Okay, so you have one hand here kind of along the side of your head. It's not back here. It's a little bit in front of you. That means your shoulders cupped. This hand is by the front foot, which is suspended, toe down. It's still called the empty stance, and your palm is here. So this is called stork flaps wings. Stork flaps wing in the Yang style is this. So there are stylistic differences. And then brush knee. So we have a brush knee on the right and left side. The brush knee movement simply is once you're in this hold the ball position and you turn and you brush down like this and push, this is your posture. You have a front knee position that's in the what we call the archer stance or the leaning stance. The side profile is this. You're pushing off the back leg. Other hand is by the thigh, just like, when we have our hands in the preparation, the hands are pointing down, palm down. Stork flapsings would have a hand up like this, depending on which side it is. And then in brush knee, the hands are like this, depending on which leg is forward. It could be either leg forward, and then the hand with the rear leg is pushing outward with the palm forward, pushing. Okay. And the way that you get there, it starts from here, and you turn to the back corner. This one goes down with the front leg, and we push. Okay. I didn't step through, as a course of discovering these postures, you step up. So I just switched the feet. Okay. And I turn to the back corner. So you have a back corner there, you have a back corner on this side. So the back corner and this hand are pointing in the same direction. And then when I fold this elbow and I bring this hand down, I push. That's your brush knee and push. Okay. If I switch feet, I have the opposite side. This is called brush knee and push. So pointing the fingers to the back corner, I fold my furthest hand away toward the ear. This hand goes toward the thigh, and then this continues to the front. Okay, so that's called brush knee, right or left side push. All right, so that's two postures. And then we have strum the lute. So strum the lute is starting from your triangle and going to a forward position. So we go back into that stance, and we stand like this. That's strum the lute. So you get to strum the lute by bringing your hands to a vertical position. You have the front toe up and the front hand with the fingertips up, and that's your strum the lute position. Okay, so these are positions that you pass through to connect to the next posture. So the form itself is really a series of these postures, and then when you link those together, you create the form. Okay, so I just went through a bunch of these postures, and you could see that if I'm facing, now this is my back side, that's my front side. Between the front and back, I'm going to face this corner. I'm on what I call the oblique line. So if I go in this direction, okay, I'm going to open the form. So I'm just going to take those few postures and show you how they can link together. Okay, so we're going to go like that, and then from here, we turn to hold the ball. You step out. Now this is the step out. That's kind of creating a small arc, so it's on the outside of that heel, and you go do the first part, the horse's mane. When we toe out and pass through to the next side, here's your checking of the weight. The foot goes out to here, and you do this as part the horse's mane right side, and then we reset to here. That's a step up to part the horse's mane. Now the next step we have is we shift like this, plant the foot just behind the heel of the forward leg. We begin to spread the hands to stork flaps wings. Your left leg is forward. You're following me from behind and doing the same movements that I'm doing on the same side. So there's your brush knee and push. As I toe out and I step up, there's my back corner. Here's my brush knee. I toe out, that's turning out 45 degrees. Check my weight, turn to the back, and here's my brush knee. Using the same step I did with stork flaps wings, I step up to strum the lute. So at that point, the form changes and you start to go backwards and you do another set of postures. But because I'm just resetting this 24 movement program for the next few weeks, I'm starting from the beginning and building those postures. So if you're following, what I just went through is basically the opening to the form, sort of a preview of the postures and some of the footwork. So when my feet are 90 degrees like this and I bend my knees, when I pick my foot up like this on the toe and I move it straight out, that's my sitting or empty stance. Okay, now a step through would be a forward lean to a turnout like this to a twist. That goes 45 degrees and I shift to here. And then I create a small arc until this foot is just about right where the other foot was on the other side. And now I'm in a leaning position or the archer stance here. So this would be my left stance. It would be your right if we're doing mirror image. But because you just have to understand that this is a step going forward. Every time we go forward and back, it's to take the weight off. So I take the weight off the front leg. I pivot out and I bring my weight over that foot. Now see, my hips are kind of flared out. So that's why we have to do that pivoting to sort of loosen up the hips to create that opening so that when we shift, we can control and support our body weight. Now, how long should your stance go? That's pretty challenging because it takes a big step. It does take a lot more strength to go out here on the supporting leg. So in the beginning, don't take the giant step, take the small step and just go forward and back. As you build some strength in the legs, then you can elongate it a bit. No need to go too deep into the stance because you're going to have some problems with your knees because your joints are not flexible enough to adapt to the position. So stay away from the long stance because it's going to support too much weight in the beginning. And your knee position and your ankles are not loose enough. So you may be in a compromised position when you put your weight on that front knee. So that's why a lot of times people, when they first start Tai Chi, will have knee problems. It's not part of Tai Chi. People that do Tai Chi don't have knee problems typically. You have the knee problems before you did Tai Chi. So you have to actually understand that the pain or any discomfort you have in your knees is not the exercise, it's the way you're doing it. So you really have to understand that when you go through and move through your movements that you don't want to put your body or compromise any of the joints because that's going to be counterproductive to learning. And the main thing is you don't do this as a wellness exercise to hurt your body. That's really something that you shouldn't be doing. So it's really, when you watch my videos, you'll get a lot of dialogue because teaching in this format, copying the movement isn't enough. You have to understand what you're doing. So because I give you this feedback on information, you have to really listen closely so that, like, knee positions and so forth, and why it feels, discomforting or maybe sitting in a stance and you're not used to it. It's because your body's too tense and you're not relaxing into it. So you have to slowly, gradually do these till your body starts to recognize what the positions are, and then it starts to put your body into a better, more aligned position. So really, that's really something that your body will begin to understand over time. But it doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't even happen in a couple of weeks. It does take time. But it is a function of time, so you have to practice, you know, a little every day, but not an extended period of time. Maybe 10 uh, repetitions of one exercise, and then just move on. Don't stay on one exercise fanatically to try to perfect it. It won't happen right away. So, on that note, it's about 10 o'clock, so that's the end of this session. If you want to continue with this form, then it'll be on next week, same time, 9:30 Wednesday. I'll see you then.